There we go. Thank you, Jerry. Hey, everybody. I'm a member of Al-Anon. My name's Aaron J. My home group is a one-purpose Al-Anon family group. Meets here on Thursday nights in Charlotte, North Carolina. 8 o'clock, we study a step each week, a tradition on the fourth Thursday of the month, and a concept when there's a fifth Thursday. And I absolutely love my home group. I want to thank the entire committee, not just for inviting me, but for all the work that went into putting this on. It's been a wonderful couple of days so far, and I'm sure it will continue to be. So thank you so much for that. I have spoken at McHenry before. I think it was about 10 years ago. And I've just been thinking about how dramatically my life has changed in that 10 or so years. I'm no longer married to an alcoholic. I don't live with an alcoholic. Well, I don't really have any alcoholics directly in my life today, but I'm still here because this program, as we've heard, is about me. And that's I'm going to try to keep the talk as much about me as possible. I do qualify for Al-Anon. My life has been affected by alcoholism and relatives and friends. But it's equally true that the defects of character that made my life so completely unmanageable before I got here, the resentment and the rage and the self-centered fear and the self-pity and the overblown sense of responsibility for everyone. I don't remember a time that my life wasn't ruled by these defects. So I usually start out my talk by saying I needed a meeting long before I picked up my first drunk. I'm here because I've got a problem, and I'm going to try to keep the focus as much as possible on that. I was born here in Charlotte, the oldest of five kids, into a very loving home. I'm full of love by any reasonable standards. I had a pretty good upbringing, but my standards had never been reasonable, and I was a miserable, miserable kid. One of the things that I was most miserable about was that along with that love came a lot of fear. And it wasn't fear of each other, it was fear for each other. It's kind of how we defined, especially how my mom defined how you know how much you love someone is how afraid you are for them, for their health and their safety and their well-being, and kind of how we defined love. And I was overwhelmed by that. We were a God-fearing family in the most literal sense of that term. So because mom truly believed that the devil was waiting around every corner for us, we were very I don't want to say isolated, but very insular. We were at church all the time. I went to a small church school from preschool on. And so here I am, I'm this kid, and I'm scared of God, and I'm scared of the devil, and and I'm just full of fear all the time. There was certainly no abuse of any kind in the family. It was just that love equals fear environment that I grew up in. And my mom's the most loving person in the world. The other thing I just remember as a family joke from an early age was that mom has to save the universe. She has this need to rescue everyone. And so, like I said, there's five siblings, but I also had a series of foster brothers that would come in one or two at a time and stay for a while and then get adopted, and another one would come in. There were, often homeless people sitting at the table with us, and strangers that mom was ministering to, staying for months at a time in the house. And these certainly aren't bad things at all, but being selfish and self-centered from a very early age, I didn't like it. I couldn't understand why mom is giving all these strangers this unconditional love. I wanted it all to myself. I decided maybe I wasn't good enough. I developed a perfectionistic streak early on, thinking if I'm just good enough, I'll get more of that love. And, I've done that my whole life. I take a situation that has nothing to do with me, make it all about me because I'm self-centered, and then make some pretty poor decisions based on that misinterpretation of what's going on. I just couldn't understand why mom was so full of fear and so smothering in her love with this need to control everything and to rescue the world. And there really wasn't much drinking in my household growing up. The only real drinker I knew growing up, may not surprise you, was my mom's mom. And now she was the fun grandma. She wasn't the one that made me go to church and sit quietly. She was the one that would sneak me a sip of every beer that I'd bring her at family gatherings, and act inappropriately in public. Up until a certain age, it's fun when your grandmother is sitting in strange men's laps at the restaurant. I couldn't understand why everybody else is so upset about that. And I got a little older, it's not so much fun. But and she always acted crazy. She didn't change when she opened that first beer, but it seemed like everybody else in the room changed when grandma opened that first beer. And like most problem drinkers I've known, she is gregarious and talented and fun. And that's what I saw growing up, having no idea about this family disease. I didn't know until Al-Anon that maybe growing up, my mom, as the oldest child in that environment, might have had something to do with why mom loved the way that she did when I was growing up. But, just had no idea about family disease. And please, this is not about blaming anyone at all. It's just about understanding how this family disease can affect us down through the generations. Maybe mom didn't want to love like that and be full of fear like that. Growing up, I just thought she was making that choice. But, going back to being a kid, like I said, I was in this small religious school where I didn't fit in. I was a perfectionist, so I skipped second grade, and then I was a year younger than everyone in my class, and the social awkwardness got much, much worse. I was just painfully self-conscious. And I had to get into Al-Anon really to learn, really just think about what the words self-conscious means. It means I'm conscious of me. It means I'm thinking about me all the time. That's all I'm thinking about. And I think that you're thinking about me as much as I'm thinking about me. And I don't think anything good about myself, so I assume you're not thinking anything good about me. And this is just on an endless tape cycle in my head for my earliest memories. I ended up getting kicked out of that school for no one particular incident. They just got tired of me fighting with every authority figure, constantly questioning everyone, just being a jerk. Halfway through eighth grade, they kicked me. Well, mom says you weren't kicked out, you were asked to leave, because that's different in mom's world. So I was asked to leave halfway through eighth grade. And then I was homeschooled for a year and a half, which was a miserable experience for everyone involved in that, because we were not getting along at this point. And then for grades 10, 11, and 12, they sent me off to another private religious school to protect me from the evil world out there. And now I've gone a couple of years with no social interaction. I'm still a year younger than everyone in my class. I went in there and it seemed like everybody had money and we didn't. They all dressed in the same fancy clothes that I didn't have. They all had the same haircut. And, I made a decision, not a conscious one, but I decided before they can reject me, I'll reject them. They're not going to want to have anything to do with me. So I'm going to pretend like I'm not trying to fit in, that I don't care. And so, I immediately started, wearing the raggediest clothes I could find that I could get away with it under their dress code, and, growing my hair as long as I could get away with it, and growing a bad teenage beard and all that stuff, and just full of fear and miserable. And I found my solution halfway through that first year. She came in halfway through, and she seemed to me like the only other freak in that school. I mean, she had her hair shaved in the back and dyed pink, and she wore crazy clothes. And I know today I could have picked her out blindfolded, because I'm just really good at finding these people that I think need my help. But I had never met anybody like her. We started dating. She was an older woman. She was 17. I was 15. That was exciting. And we were just off to the races. And it was exhilarating, and it was terrifying. And I don't know if she was looking for someone to save her, to rescue her. Probably not. I do know today through inventory that I was looking for someone to save. Mom, without knowing it and without meaning to, had taught me that to be a good person, you go out in the world and you find the sickest people you can find, and you hold them down and help the hell out of them, whether they want it or not. And that's what good people do. And doing that filled a hole in my heart that I didn't know was there until it was filled. And so, like I said, we were off to the races, and it was crazy. I have a full-time job now. I have to lie for her and bail her out, make excuses for it, track her down, try to figure out where she is at any given point. And she lied about everything for no reason, when the truth, would have served her better, as they say. But here's what it did for me. Well, two things. First of all, I have no time now to sit alone wondering what's wrong with me, which I can't do. I can't sit by myself. I've got to have something to do, someone to take care of. But also, I truly believe that she needed me, and I needed more than anything to feel needed. I remember at 15 years old, specific memories of how, for instance, how fulfilling it was every time I got to hold her hair when she threw up, because here's a sick person who needs my help, and I'm such a great guy that I'm here to take care of her. And just, I look at 15-year-olds today and try to imagine that, and it's really unimaginable to me. But that's where I was at. So we were off and running. We dated for a couple of years. We graduated the same year. She was 19. I was 17 when we graduated, and she did the normal thing. She went off to school, to college, and I said, I hate my parents. I hate authority. I hate school, and so I'm never going to college, and I'm moving out. And I was going to regret that many years later. But and I say I hated school, and I did. But again, through inventory, it was so much fear. The idea of going off to another new place and being around another group of people that I knew I wasn't going to fit in with was just overwhelming for me. So I said, nope, I'm going to move out. And So I did. And, for the first time in my life, I got to choose who I'm going to live with. And this is who I chose. Four 17, 18-year-old guys. I can't believe someone rented a house to us. And it was not a terrible place for the first day or so. And then it was pretty terrible. But two of these guys, well on their way toward probable alcoholism with some other issues thrown in there. And then the fourth guy, who I'm still good friends with today, just one of these weird, normal people. Not an alcoholic, but he's also not whatever I am. And he did not last very long in that chaotic environment. He said, I have to get up, go to work in the morning. I can't live like this. You can imagine what a house for 17, 18-year-olds would be like. And so he moved out after a few weeks, moved back in with his mom. And I was so angry at him. How could he abandon me here with these drunken idiots? And how could he do that to me? And I started living in this haze of self-righteous indignation about, why is it always on me? Why do I always have to be the one to make sure the bills get paid and the holes in the walls get patched and the cops get talked to when they're here every other week? Why is it always on me? Why can't they get their act together? Just give me a break. Let me rest for a few days. And that's how I thought my whole life. It never occurred to me that I had any options, that I could choose to live somewhere else. It literally never occurred to me. It's always that someone else has to change for my life to get better. And that's the unmanageability to me of that first step. So things have gotten more and more chaotic. I'll try to zip through this pretty quick, but I did have some experiences here that were kind of important for my Al-Anon recovery. We had to get a fourth roommate to pay the rent. We met this really old guy who, looking back on it, might have been 30, but he seemed really old and he seemed like he had a whole lot of money. And so we thought, well, maybe he'll pay the rent. He moved in, and it turned out, not only was he probably an alcoholic with these other issues, he was selling these other issues out of my house. That's why he had so much money all the time. And then things got really chaotic. Now, I have literally hundreds of people coming in and out of my house at any given time. I think every rave in Charlotte in 1993 after party was held in my basement, and it was absolute insanity. Now I'm kicking people off the bathroom floor in the morning so I can go to work. I'm stalking around the house with a shotgun, scaring people because I'm just so angry that my life is so unmanageable. And why do I have to live like this? One of the other roommates, we got to be pretty close. We hung out a lot together. He wasn't doing that stuff the other guy was selling at first. And so we drank a lot together and did some other stuff together. And this is usually where I remember to say, I was with these guys doing a lot of what they were doing, drinking and otherwise. And, if anything had ever done the magic that I've heard hundreds of alcoholics describe over the years, if anything had made me feel comfortable in my own skin or just good enough, I think I'd probably be dead. Nothing worked for me there before the grace of God. So there's no room for any kind of self-righteous attitude on my part. Well, if they hadn't, drunk so much, they wouldn't be drunks. I gave it a good shot. It didn't work for me. Anyway, we hung out a lot together and got to be pretty close friends. And what happened was he got hooked on the stuff the new guy was selling, and it was drastic. Overnight, he was a completely different person. And I was devastated. I'd never seen somebody change like this overnight. And so I must have read about tough love somewhere. And I remember I sat him down one day, and it was two 17-year-olds, and said, hey, man, I really love you, and our friendship means a lot to me, but if you keep doing this stuff, we can't be friends. And I just remember he looked me in the eye and said, okay, bye. And I was devastated. How could he choose this stuff over our friendship? Don't I mean anything to him? And I'm so grateful to know today in Al-Anon that nothing out there at all has anything at all to do with me. And that is such a freedom today. But back then, everything had to do with me. And I remember the first time my girlfriend, we were trying a long distance relationship. She was in Tennessee, and she was coming to visit for the first time after months apart. And I'm tidying. I'm 17. I have my own house, and I'm proud of my crack house. And she's going to come see the place that I live, and I've got the whole weekend planned out because I'm a planner. And this is just a testament to the type of place I chose to live. She walked in the door. Someone handed her a substance. She did what she always did, which was to ingest the substance without bothering to ask what it was. And so she's gone. I've got plans. Her plans for the evening now involve sitting in the corner for the next 8 to 10 hours looking at her hands. That's what she's going to be doing tonight. And I was devastated. How could she do that to me? I don't know. I think that's the crux of my insanity, is that every time someone does the exact same thing they've always done, I'm shocked. I can't believe they did it again, because that's my insanity. This time it'll be different. This time they'll love me the way I want to be loved. This time they'll behave the way I think that they should behave. And every time they do the exact same thing, I just can't believe it. I don't know why that was the final straw with her, because, like I said, it wasn't the first or the 100th time she had done something like that. But it was. I had to break up with her, but I'm not proud of this. I was scared of her. She was getting increasingly erratic and violent. And so, like a real man, I waited till she was back in Tennessee and called her on the phone and broke up with her. And it went about like I expected to. Her roommate was calling me saying she's hurting herself. You've got to change your mind. And somehow I was able to say no. And I don't know how. I mean, that was God. I didn't believe in working in my life because I never said no to anyone. If I was going to get a pat on the back or just feel like a good guy, um, you know, I put myself in insanely dangerous situations via my inability to say no. But somehow I was able to say, no, I can't do that. And I moved around a lot in my late teens, early 20s. She was never able to get my phone number, but she continued calling for a couple of years. She'd call my mom and dad, and always at 3 o'clock in the morning or something, and they'd tell me the next day she's calling again. And I never called her back. And I talk about her a lot because she was my first chosen alcoholic. I chose her. Um, and I hated her. When I came into Al-Anon, I thought she had ruined my view of love and women and relationships. I truly despised her. I am so selfishly grateful that I had a couple of years, maybe 1 year, of recovery when I found out that sometime in her early 20s, she did commit suicide. And I'm so grateful that I had some recovery, because if I had not, I would have done what I always did, which was to somehow make that all about me. Oh, what could I have done? You know, maybe if I had taken one of those phone calls, and I would have seen the incredible arrogance and ego in thinking that I could have had some power over this disease that she was powerless over. I had no overblown sense of responsibility, but the resentment and the anger had vanished. I felt sorry for her. She was not a horrible person. She had a horrible disease. I'm so grateful for that freedom. That's the power of the steps. But I found out real quick, now I'm 18 years old, that I cannot not have someone to obsess about it. So it was a matter of weeks or months before I reached out, grabbed my next volunteer hostage. She was one of the many people hanging out at the house, and her older sister's alcoholism was destroying her house. She needed to get out, and so we moved in together. I think she was still in high school. I was 18 at this point. She was 17, and spent the next 4.5 years together, off and on, mostly on. And it was rough. I mean, it was bad. I don't know if she's an alcoholic. We both did a lot of drinking. We both did a lot of emotional damage to each other. Just two people that hated themselves and therefore weren't going to have any respect with someone who'd want to be in a relationship with them. And it was bad. We had some good times. I mean, I hope I wouldn't have stayed that long if they were all terrible. We had some good times. We traveled all across the country, got a VW van. I had the even longer beard than this, and the long hair, and the VW, and went over half the states, months at a time. And I was trying so hard to be a hippie. And I found out that people that desperately need Al-Anon make the worst hippies possible. I mean, just like control freak, schedule oriented. We're going to do it my way. It's my van. I was the worst hippie that ever lived. I had the look. I just could never find that seeming ease and comfort of not caring about things. I really gave it a good shot, but I was really bad at it. So we had some good times, but it was mostly really rough. But I stayed for the same reason I've always stayed, in relationships and in friendships and jobs. It's never going to get any better than this. So I better stick with what I've got. She needs me. I truly believe she needed me, and I desperately needed to feel needed. But more than anything, I think it's just that the worst relationship you can imagine was better than the abject terror of sitting alone in a room by myself with only myself to think about. And so we were going to get married. We found a place up in Colorado. We had, packed up all our stuff. The lease was up on the little place we were living in, and we were going to move and go start our magical journey together. And what happened was I met Ann. Ann and I were working together at a natural food store. When you look the way I did, the only job you could get was managing a natural food store. And Ann and I got to be really close friends. And I just never met anybody like her. I mean, just beautiful inside and out, but there was no possibility of a relationship in my mind. She would just talk about things like, every day I have to make a decision that God is everything or God is nothing. I just believe if I do the footwork and let go of the results, everything's going to work out the way it's supposed to. And this was drastically different from the dogma. This spirituality was so different from the dogma that I had grown up with. So, I know today that a large part of what I was so attracted to was the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Ann was about 3 years sober, I think. I'm not sure when we met, but anyway, 3-4 years sober, and we just fell head over heels. I could not believe that someone this incredible would want to have anything to do with someone like me. I hated every single thing about myself, and I just could not believe that someone this beautiful inside and out would want to be in a relationship with me. But I have a fiance, And so I had to end that relationship. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And it's really embarrassing to admit why it was so hard, because I truly believe that she could not live without me. And I don't know how you can have zero self-esteem, no sense of self-worth whatsoever, and still convince yourself that someone just can't live without you. But I could do it. And I ended that relationship. She's fine, by the way. She has thanked me on more than one occasion for ending that abomination of a relationship. But so, she turns out she was living just fine without me. But at the time, I just didn't think she was going to survive. But another awkward thing was we had a friend staying with us who was from Colorado, who we had told that we would take him home when we went to get married in Colorado. And so, I'm a man of my word, no matter how insane it is. So after the breakup, we all packed in this car. We packed up everything we owned, and I drove straight from Charlotte, North Carolina to Boulder, Colorado. I wouldn't let anybody else drive. It took almost exactly 24 hours, and just full-blown insane control mode. If I'm going to do something painful and difficult, I'm going to do it in the most insane way possible, and dangerous way possible, just to get it done. I dropped him off, dropped her off some friends, gave her everything we owned, because that's how I dealt with guilt. You take the car, you take everything. I had a duffel, at 22 years old, I had a duffel bag and a pillow. That's everything I owned in the world. Hopped on a Greyhound bus for a 44-hour trip back, which was delightful. And got back to the bus station at 3 or 4 in the morning, and Annie picked me up, and we moved in together, because that's how I date, apparently. And Annie does like me to remember to say that there was no infidelity there. We literally moved in together before we had our first date. That's actually the truth. Probably not advisable, but so we moved in together, and it was just pink cloud. It was just, we had neither of us had experienced this kind of romantic, overwhelming love before. And I started learning about her program and read the first 164 pages of her book, and started going to open meetings with her, hanging out with young people in recovery, enthusiastic young people. And I loved all that. Obviously I love drunks. I've never been around sober ones, so this is great. And I heard her give her talk for the first time in an AA meeting, and thought, oh man, this so she really needs this. This is not the person she's describing that she used to be, is not the woman I fell in love with. And so we were just absolutely riding high. This relationship became my higher power. I didn't have a higher power. I rejected the God of my upbringing. This relationship validated me in a way that I never thought possible. It was my God. And that was about to come crashing down. A few months in, we went to visit my friend that I'm the normal guy, the old roommate. Went to visit him and his girlfriend. We were out to eat at a restaurant that I think was also a brewery. And they were just, Annie has assured me that she's sober 3-4 years. She's fine being around alcohol. I'm not alcoholic. My friends aren't alcoholic. So they're bringing around pitchers or shot glasses of beer to see what we want to order a pitcher of. And Annie just reaches over and swigs a shot glass of beer. Now, I'm not here to tell her story, but she has given me permission to share that she was restless, irritable, and discontent. She was looking to drink and just looking for an excuse. And she was hoping we were going to say, well, it's about time. What do you want to drink? And that's not the reaction she got. They know she's sober. Obviously, I know she's sober. I was appalled. What the hell are you doing? And she played it off. She slid that glass back. I was just fooling around. There's hardly any alcohol in that. And that's it. That's the most I've ever seen her drink. And everything changed, because we're dealing with a disease here of which one symptom is the overconsumption of alcohol. And I was about to find out about a lot of other symptoms of alcoholism that I didn't know anything about. So we got back to Charlotte, and I was a little, concerned about this, but I'm still in my pink cloud. And, it had never really occurred to me that she could drink again. And again, this is her story, but she's given me permission to tell it. She had a new sponsor. She was going back through the steps. And on her 5th step, just kind of as an afterthought, she said, oh, by the way, a couple months ago, I took a swig of beer. And her sponsor said, okay, well, you're going to need to change your sobriety date. Well, all I can tell you is that the woman that came home from that meeting with her sponsor was not the woman that I fell in love with. The woman that I fell in love with loved AA and loved her sponsor and was so grateful for the fellowship and recovery. And this woman was angry and resentful and saying stuff like, if I'm going to pick up a white chip, I'm going to go earn a damn white chip. And I believed her, and I was absolutely terrified. First of all, I knew it was all my fault, because I'm that powerful and important. If it hadn't been for me taking her and putting her in that situation, she wouldn't have had that drink. And now I'm thinking, how am I going to live the rest of my life walking on eggshells, trying to manage her mood, trying to check in on her to see how she's doing, just waiting for the moment that I screw up again and she really does get drunk. this time. And, I can't imagine how I'm going to live the rest of my life with this. That's all I'm thinking about all the time. I'm trying to, check, like I said, check in on her and ask her, how are you doing? How are you doing every 5 minutes? Sure, it drove her nuts. And I'm just absolutely obsessed. Like I said, I cannot imagine life without the alcohol. I can't. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. It's, in my mind, it's the only good thing that's ever happened to me. I can't go on without this relationship. But I can't imagine life with the alcohol. Not like this, because she is angry. She's resentful. She's blaming me for things that have nothing to do with me. It's just this behavior is absolutely insane, but she's not drinking. And I don't know how to deal with that. At least when someone's drunk, I can blame it on the drink. Well, they were drunk. They'll sober up. They won't do that again. Here's someone who's doing all of that behavior that I've dealt with in active alcoholism, and they're not drinking. She described it as a long period of dry drunk. And I didn't know what that was. And I don't need to describe it to you now. If you've experienced it, I don't need to describe it. And if you haven't experienced it, I really can't describe it. But it was absolutely insane. We went through, the first couple of years, just about everything in our relationship that I've ever heard described in active alcoholism without the drinking. So I am just out of my mind insane. I'm at the end of my rope. I'm suicidal. I don't want to go on living like this. I can't. And I'm describing this insanity to a good friend of hers in AA who did a very loving thing. I'm so grateful for her today. I don't think she's still sober, but she saved my life as a member of AA to say, hey, do you know about Al-Anon? And I'm sure I said something like, yeah, I know about that Al-Anon stuff. My opinion of Al-Anon came from the uninformed views of some members of AA at the time. And so it was just all ignorance. I did not have a high opinion of Al-Anon because we didn't know what it was, no idea. And so I said, yeah, I don't think Al-Anon's for me. And she said, okay, she didn't push it. She just said, I've been going and it's really been helping me. And I just thought it might be helpful for you. And I'm so grateful to her. I'm so grateful for desperation, the gift of desperation, as we say, because I was at the end of the rope. I was willing to try one more thing to prove that that's not going to work either. I'm too broken. I'm too crazy. And so I did. So sometime in June or July of 1999, I don't know the date, nobody told me to write it down, but it's definitely June or July, as far as I can tell, of 99, I walked into my first Al-Anon meeting, and I told you, I cannot overstate how much I don't want to be in Al-Anon. And I walk in there and I'm even more convinced that I don't belong in Al-Anon. I look around, it appears to be about 95% women. The median age looks to be about 102. And I was 23. Everybody looks old when you're 23, but I just thought there's no way anybody in here can have anything in common with me. And they didn't care what I looked like. I still had the big beard down to here. It was a different color then, long, ratty hair. They didn't care what I looked like. They welcomed me with open arms. Nobody ever asked if I was looking for the other meeting. Please don't do that. I hear people do that sometimes. I would have eventually figured out if I was looking for the other meeting. What I was looking for was a reason to not come back. And nobody would give me that reason. And I'm so grateful for that. And, because of my pure ignorance about what I thought Al-Anon was, I really thought we were going to sit down and the woman next to me was going to say something like, and then he got drunk and he crashed the car into the house and then the house burnt down and the dog died and I'll pass. And I was going to have to say, I'm Aaron and my girlfriend took a sip of beer and I'm really freaking out about it. And they were going to say, get out of this room. You clearly don't qualify for Al-Anon. I'm so grateful that I landed in a meeting with Al-Anon where, you know what? They weren't talking about alcoholics. They were talking about themselves, their defects of character, their spiritual life, how they had found a way that they could be happy, joyous, and free no matter what was going on with the alcoholics or anybody else in their life. I'm so grateful that that's the meeting that I landed in first. Because the other meetings do exist. So, stick with the winners, like they say. It's been my experience. But so I kept coming back, and Annie and I got married in January of 2000, and it was rough. Like I said, she describes it, her words, long period of dry drunk. She just could not get back the spiritual and emotional sobriety that she had had early on, even though she wasn't drinking. But in Al-Anon, they told me, yeah, she's nuts, but so are you. And you can only do something about one side of that equation. And if you're going to recover, you're going to have to take the steps. And that's another thing I'm so grateful for. I love the meetings and the fellowship. I couldn't live without it. But in my experience, it's the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. That's the program to me. And they said, if you're going to get better, you're going to have to take these steps. And if you're going to do that, you're going to have to get a sponsor. Asking another man to help me was gut-wrenching. And my arrogance and fear, I don't ask people to help. I didn't back then. I'll help you whether you want to or not, like I said. But reaching out and asking another man to help me was one of the most difficult things I've ever done, and probably the single best thing I've ever done for myself, because this is where my recovery really took off. This guy was always at the Tuesday meeting at the club at 7. We had nothing at all in common. He was my dad's age. He wasn't married to an alcoholic, but he had something I wanted. And so one day I finally got up the courage and said, hey, will you be my sponsor? And he asked me a couple of things that I asked guys that I work with today. He said, are you willing to do everything that I do to get what I've got? Because that's the only way this is going to work. And of course, I had no idea what he was talking about. So I said, yes. And he said, are you willing to pass it on exactly the way it's given to you? And I said, yeah, I'm willing to do this deal. And he said, well, let's get started. But I got to tell you, I'm also in AA. And I didn't know that. In most of our meetings in Charlotte, we ask members of other anonymous fellowships to maintain their anonymity in Al-Anon, just so we can keep the focus on the Al-Anon program. And I'm really grateful that he respected that, because I don't know if I would have asked him. But my first thought though was there was like 35 people in that room. I could still pick a drunk out of the room because I just love these people. But at that point, it just would have been really awkward to say, oh, well, never mind. So I just said, I don't care. I want what you have. Let's do this thing. He said, let's get started. And I really thought I had taken the first step. Intellectually, I knew that if Annie's going to drink, I'm powerless over it. I couldn't control anything else she was doing. Why would I think I could stop her from drinking? So, and of course my life's unmanageable. I'm sitting in these churches after I swore I'd never step foot in a church again. Obviously something's gone wrong in my life. So let's move on. He had me take a much deeper look at First Step, and I'm really grateful for that. He had me write down everything in my life, every person, institution, outcome, everything that I'm powerless over. But then, much more importantly, he had me write down next to each one of those things, specifically how my life becomes unmanageable when I'm trying to control those things. That's the connection I needed to see. My life's not unmanageable because I'm powerless over alcoholism, whatever it is. If that were true, my life's always going to be unmanageable. My life's only unmanageable because I'm trying to control stuff that I don't have any power over. And that's the connection I needed to see, because I'd lived my whole life with this delusion that if I love you, then obviously I can't be okay unless you're okay. And of course, you being okay means you're doing what I think you ought to be doing and not doing what I think you shouldn't be doing. And if I'm trying to explain to you why your behavior is not acceptable, and if you're not applying my solution to what I think your problem is, the only reason for that, as someone who clearly loves you, the only reason I can imagine for that is that I haven't explained it well enough yet. Why else wouldn't you be getting this? So I'll explain it over and over and over in slightly different words. This really simple concept that I'm trying to get across to you, with this delusion, this fantasy that one day you're finally going to get it, and you're going to apologize for not getting it first. That's always part of the fantasy. And say, oh, it's obvious my behavior is so hurtful and unacceptable. And then you're going to change. And then and only then am I going to be okay. And that's not just unmanageability. That is absolute insanity that I've lived my whole life with. And so I really needed to take a deep dive into the dumpster fire of unmanageability that results when I'm trying to run the show, for me to even think about this power greater than myself. I'm glad the second step doesn't say God, but I wasn't fooled. I knew what was coming up next. I'd seen the steps, and I came in with an enormous amount of prejudice against the religion and the God of my upbringing. And they had done a really good job of convincing me that their version of God was my only option. The very idea of choosing my own conception was not only not an option, that was a straight, immediate shot to hell, the way I grew up. And so I'm so grateful that with my sponsor's help, I was able to shed that prejudice, let go of everything I dragged in with me about God or a higher power, and start all over. He said, look at step one, look at the unmanageability that results. Your only hope is that there's some power. Doesn't even say there's a being. It says some power greater than me that could restore me to sanity. It's my only hope. And I wasn't quite arrogant enough to say whatever is keeping the planet spinning couldn't restore me to sanity. And that's all I had to do to move on. And you'd think it'd be an easy transition once I've made that decision, or not made the decision, come to believe, to make that decision. Our Paths to Recovery, one of our books, says it naturally follows that we would make a decision. It did not naturally follow for me, even though I came to believe. I struggled with step 3. I was terrified of giving up control. And I don't know how many times it was explained to me that I'm never asked to give up control. I'm being asked to give up the delusion of control. I don't have any delusion. I don't have any control to give up. If I think I have any control to give up, I need to take another look at that first step. I'm only being asked to give up the delusion that I have control over anything in my life that's not me and my behavior. And so with my sponsor's help, I was able to finally make that decision, that commitment turn my will and my life over to the care, as someone mentioned earlier. I love that part of the care of a power greater than me that I choose to call God today. And the first step that my sponsor had me take to demonstrate that I had made this decision, this commitment, was to do inventory. We've got a ton of ways to do a fourth step in Al-Anon, and I don't think there's any right or wrong way. I think the right way is probably the way your sponsor did it, and it's suggesting to you. I'm really grateful for the simplicity, the way my sponsor took me through it. We had a resentments list, a fears list, and a sex conduct list, and maybe a little catch-all list for anything that wasn't on those three. And I love the simplicity of that. A resentment list is a great way of tricking someone like me into taking my own inventory, because I get to start out by listing everyone who's ruined my life. And I had a long list of people. I could list 50 people off the top of my head that had done these horrible things to me from preschool on, and I got to write them all down. And then these horrible things they'd done to me. And well, it gets a little harder in the third column here, where I got to look at how it affected me, and I get to see fear, fear, fear. My existence is shot through with it. But then, of course, I have to turn the page and look at me. Well, first, I get to think about maybe forgiving them, not for their sake, because they don't care. Maybe if I want to move on, I need to realize that maybe they were just as sick as I was and doing the best that they could. And maybe if I want to move on in my life, I need to forgive them and let go of that stuff. But then I'm told to set all of that aside and look at me, my behavior. What was my contribution to every single resentment here? And, why did I continuously make decisions based on self that put me in a position to be hurt? And this is painful, because this is where I get to see my defects in black and white. And I get to find out that the very things that I thought defined me as a good person are not just not assets, they're these huge character defects that are blocking me from the sunlight of the spirit. Taking care of everybody but myself, not a good thing. I was never selfless. I was always trying to get something out of that, to be loved the way I wanted to be loved, or to whatever it was. There was always a motivation behind that. My self-loathing, I really thought that was humility. I thought humble people just think I'm not good at anything and I never will be. That's ridiculous. It's just another form of ego. And so down the list we go and enumerate these multiple defects of character. And like I said, it's really painful, but it's such good news, because if it's me that's making my life unmanageable, there's some hope. If I still think it's you that's making my life unmanageable, I'm right back at step one, and my unmanageability remains. And so with my sponsor's help, I was able to identify these defects and finish up that inventory with him, the fifth step. And he sent me home. Spent some time in prayer meditation, as we just heard, reviewing the first 5 proposals to make sure I'd been as thorough as possible. And I really do believe that I was at that time, and make sure there wasn't any of these character defects that I really wanted to hang on to. I was ready, more so than ever before, and probably ever since, to have God remove these defects, because I saw what they were doing to me. I saw that that's what's making me miserable. And so, having determined that, I got down on my knees, I prayed a 7-step prayer, I went to bed, I got up the next morning, and nothing had changed. I don't know what I expected to happen. I remember calling my sponsor and just saying, I don't feel any different. I feel like I still have these defects. And he probably said something real loving, like, did you bother reading the words in the step? Because of course it says nothing about the defects being removed. It says we're entirely ready and we humbly ask God to remove them. And a big part of that humility to me today is that, like everything else, is not going to happen on my time. It's going to happen on God's time. It's probably not going to be the defect that's making me uncomfortable that gets removed next. Hopefully it'll be the one that's preventing me from being of maximum service to God and my fellows that gets removed next. But that readiness that the 6th step talks about, that's not some nebulous concept. Oh, am I ready? Am I not? That's an action that I take every day. How do I know I'm ready? It's through my action. And it's usually through taking different action than I want to or than I used to. And, God has never removed resentment from me, no matter how much I pray for it to be removed, if I keep doing for someone what they could do for themselves. I can pray and pray and pray. I'm so resentful that I'm doing this person's job for them. In my experience, until I have the courage to stop doing for them what they could be doing for themselves, that resentment doesn't go away. God's never removed my self-centered fear if I refuse to do stuff that terrifies me, like public speaking. I mean, the first time when I came into Al-Anon, I couldn't read a single step off a piece of paper being passed around while we were sitting because I was so terrified of people. My hands shook so badly I couldn't read. So the first time I was asked to speak at a meeting, I was physically ill. But I got up there somehow, asked for God to give me the courage, and did it. And then the first time I was asked to speak at, an event like this, hundreds of people, and they give you like a year to think about that every day. Every day I would think about it and have physical pain and I'd say, God, please remove this defect. This is self-centered fear. I'm just worried, what are they going to think? Am I going to make a fool of myself? God, just please remove this defect of character so that I can get up there and, to the best of my ability, share what this program and the God of my understanding have done in my life. And I pray that every day. And I can tell you, when I got up behind that podium, I was just as terrified as I had been when I first said yes. But the point is, the next time it got a little easier. And the time after that, it got a little easier. I got to take the action first. I want God to remove the defect first, and then I'll do anything God wants me to do. And it's never worked in that order for me. I've got to take the action first, despite how I feel. And in participating in my defects removal, the God of my understanding is able and willing to remove those defects, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Another one of my favorite defects characters, self-righteous indignation, still today. I'm better, but I like how it feels. And I hate to say that, but I just say, God, I know it's your will that I treat this person with love and respect, but I just can't, because I hate them. I can't stand them. And so, God, you just go ahead and remove that defect. And then I'll go treat them, with love and respect. And the God of my understanding says, yeah, it doesn't work that way. You go treat that person with love and respect that they deserve as a child of God. And in doing so, God is able and willing to remove that defect. Don't get me wrong, I can't remove the defects. If I could do that myself, I wouldn't be here. But in my experience, I have to participate in the removal through my actions every day. I got to move on and make amends. Got to take, I think, every single person on that resentment list and move them over to the 8-step list, and add some people on there that I had harmed that I didn't resent. And boy, I'm so glad for strong sponsorship throughout all the steps, but particularly in 8 and 9. I would have really messed this up. I would have gone out with the wrong intentions, trying to get exonerated, trying to get a pat on the back, contacting people that it was going to harm. My sponsor, we went through every single one in his order and said, how are we going to do this? What are we making amends for? How are we going to do it? When are we going to do it? And I needed that structure for this. And so I was able to clean up that wreckage and make amends to every single person. Go back to that church school that I swore I would drive out of my way to not drive past it because of how I felt physically ill when I drove past it, that resentment and shame. That's a ridiculous way to live. I was able to go back there and make amends to the pastors and the principal and the teachers that I had been so miserable to, and just on down the line, coworkers and family members. And most of these people I've never seen again. So it's not always about fixing relationships, although sometimes it does that. But, I don't have to worry about seeing any of them again. I can go anywhere and do anything and never have to worry about running into someone. That is such a freedom. But another amazing part of 9 for me is that I was hoping that when I made these amends, my guilt and shame would be removed, because I was carrying around a lot of it. And that was my experience. The guilt and shame vanished. But what I didn't expect was that the lingering resentments, even though I'd taken a thorough 4th and 5th, as thorough as I could, I still had some resentments toward these people. When I made amends and I went out and, my sponsor was very specific. We're not asking them for forgiveness because we're not asking them for anything. We're not putting any burden on them. I'm acknowledging the harm that was done to them. I'm expressing regret and remorse. Of course, if I stole it, I paid it back. If I broke it, I fixed it. But most of all, for me, I am making a commitment to the person I've harmed, to myself, and to the God of my understanding, to change, to amend. And so once I did that and cleaned up my stuff, the resentment toward that person was gone. And I did not understand that at all. I thought if I was resentful toward you, of course you have to come apologize to me. And then maybe I'll, magnanimously bestow my forgiveness upon you. And that's not happened yet for me. So what power to know that if I'm feeling resentful, I just need to make amends to have that removed. And I didn't understand that for years until I heard a really well-known AA speaker who passed away a few years ago describe it perfectly. So this is, everything I've said is not mine, but this is directly ripped off. He said, I hate feeling guilt. I would rather feel anything but guilt and shame. So if I've done something to you that I need to feel guilty for, I need a resentment towards you close at hand, so that every time I feel that guilt, I can grab the resentment and justify it, because what you did was worse, or you did it first. I wouldn't have done what I did if you hadn't done what you did. I need that resentment right there. I need it healthy to protect me from the guilt. When I take care of the guilt and the shame, the resentment has no more purpose, and I'm completely free. And that is amazing. That's been my experience. And I never have to carry around that combination of guilt, shame, and resentment if I'm continuing to take personal inventory every day and then promptly admit it when I'm wrong. I love this. To me, 10 is so much broader. It says women are wrong. 8 and 9 talk about harm. I can go weeks or months without harming someone, but I'm wrong probably at least once a day. And when I'm wrong, I've got to be willing to promptly admit it. And I've got to do it promptly because I've still got that justifier in my head. The longer I wait, the less of a big deal it seems like. So, I got to try to promptly admit that I'm wrong and then amend that behavior, whatever it may be. And, the good news about step 10, as we all know, is that it means the defects are not all going to be removed. They're going to be lessened, as we heard earlier. But, it says when they crop up, it suggests that I do 4 pretty simple things. They're not always easy, but they're pretty simple. But pray about it, talk to somebody else about it because I'm too far inside it to see it. Make amends, if necessary, and then just simply try to go make myself of service to someone else, and not in the old way of going and taking care of someone so I don't have to think about me, actually being of service, which Al-Anon has allowed me to learn how to do. When I'm willing to do those 4 simple things, my life stays pretty manageable, pretty happy, joyous, and free. I didn't know how to pray when I got here. My mom, who again is the most loving person I've ever met, but she prayed all the time, every day, and she was the most fearful person I'd ever met in my life. And I thought, if this is what prayer gets you, I don't have any interest in it. So, I'd pray to get what I wanted, and then I didn't get it, and then that was just more proof that God hated me because I wasn't good enough. And I got to throw all that away again. I love the simplicity of praying only for knowledge of God's will and the power to carry that out. That's it. That's all I get to pray for. That means I don't have to figure out what I need so I can pray to get it. I don't have to figure out what you need so I can pray for you to get it. And it also means that if I'm seeking God's will and trying to do the footwork in the direction that I feel led, I wish it were clear many times, but if I'm seeking God's will, trying to do the footwork in the direction that I feel led, that means whatever the outcome is, even if it's the worst circumstance or outcome that I can imagine, that's exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I have the tools, thanks to this program and the God of my understanding, to handle whatever that outcome may be. And I'm going to be okay. And that concept that I'm going to be okay, or even I am okay, even in the midst of that, is a miraculous concept for someone like me. And to me, the idea that I'm going to be okay is the spiritual awakening that we're promised is the result of these steps. And I'm going to finish up in a few minutes with a short reading that sums up my spiritual experience much more eloquently than that. But, having had this spiritual awakening, this complete psychic overhaul, being a completely different person than the broken, terrified, angry person who came in here, it suggested that I do a couple of pretty simple things if I want to continue on this path of spiritual growth. Practice these principles in all my affairs and try to carry this message to others. And, trying to carry the message in the rooms, to me, looks like I'm an active member of my home group. I sponsor guys. I've been blessed to sponsor guys. What an incredible blessing that is. To be able to work with these guys and have every painful, shameful thing I ever went through that I swore I'd never tell anybody about become a blessing and a gift when I can share with a guy who thinks he's the only guy who's done that or felt that or thought that, and see the light come in their eyes when they see that there is hope. What an incredible blessing. I've been blessed to be an Al-Anon sponsor. I was an Al-Anon sponsor for 8 years early on in my recovery. That was a huge part of my recovery. I'm so grateful for that. And on down the list. And I don't do this stuff because I'm a great guy. I do it because I have experienced in recovery what happens when I stop trying to carry the message. My life gets unmanageable pretty quickly. And carrying the best way I can carry the message usually outside the rooms is trying to practice these principles in all my affairs and realizing that I might be the only version of Al-Anon that someone's ever come across. And sometimes that's not a pretty picture. Sometimes I think, what if someone at work confided in me that they were dealing with alcoholism? And I shared with them about this spiritual program of Al-Anon. Would I have been a good witness for this program? And sometimes I doubt that. So I try to keep an open mind because, in an Al-Anon meeting, I am on my best behavior. And it's not that it's not the real me. It's just the best me you're ever going to see. So that means a few hours a week, I'm just a spiritual giant. And then, somebody cuts me off in traffic on the way home and all that flies right out the window. I'm trying to behave everywhere like I behave when I'm with you, because that's the person that I want to be. My life today is beyond anything I could have imagined. Let's see, so many things. I have a wonderful relationship with my entire crazy family, none of whom are in recovery, and they all desperately need it, and that is none of my business, and I stay out of their business. I've got one sister who's been in and out of AA. My mom came to one Al-Anon meeting with me once, and it's just not for her, and that's okay. But when her dad was dying and she was dealing with her drunk mother out in Arizona, she knew who to call. And what a blessing that she could call me, and I'm not going to give her advice, but I can share things I've learned in Al-Anon. Really simple stuff that I didn't know before Al-Anon either. Like, you don't have to stay in that room with what's going on right now. I mean, just things that you wouldn't think would have to be explained to us, but certainly had to be explained to me, and I can share my experience, strength, and hope with my mom, who I love so dearly. I'm so grateful that we've had this healing of our relationship because of my experience in Al-Anon, whether she goes or not. What else? I went back to school in my mid-late 20s, got a little 2-year degree, I got my foot in the door, and now I have an actual grown-up career. You know, what does that have to do with Al-Anon? That's everything. There's no way I would have faced the abject terror of going back to school at 26 or 27, whatever it was, and sitting with these 17, 18-year-olds. I didn't know how to turn on a computer, literally. Now I've got an IT degree. I mean, that's all Al-Anon. That's all it is. I used to sit in speaker meetings and hear people talk about these miracles in their lives and just think, well, that's great for you, but there's just no way that's going to happen for me. And I can't tell you it's going to happen for you, but I can share that I didn't believe it, and it's happened for me. But you know what? We're promised a spiritual awakening. We're not promised that everything's going to work out the way we wanted it to or the way we expected it to. Sometimes I forget to say that Annie did change her sobriety date. She's got, I think, 22 years now, continuous sobriety. I'm so grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous, for her recovery. I've learned a lot from her recovery over the years. We had a lot of good years and we had some really bad years. We had times when we were traveling to conferences together, and we had times when we weren't talking to each other. And we did our level best to apply these traditions in our relationship. But toward the end, we just realized that this isn't working. We're both trying to force a solution, and we just could not find a way forward together. And so in November of 2015, we made a mutual, excruciating decision to separate, to go our separate ways. And it was by far the most painful thing I've ever experienced. When I came into Al-Anon, divorce was literally the worst thing I can imagine, worse than death. And so, I was much better by this point, obviously, in recovery, but it was still so excruciating. It's not what either of us wanted. We just knew this wasn't going to work. And I felt like I had failed Al-Anon. I never felt like Al-Anon failed me, but I felt like I failed Al-Anon. How can I go carry this message? And, obviously it didn't work. My marriage is over. And I'm so grateful that I had friends in the program and a sponsor who reminded me that, this program doesn't always save relationships. Sometimes it does, and that's great. But it doesn't always save relationships. What it does is it saves lives. And that's what it's done for me. But also, I'm so grateful that because Annie and I were and are practicing these principles in all our affairs, not only were we able to get through that separation and divorce with dignity and grace, but we're still great friends today. We talk at least once a week. Sometimes relationships change, and that's what's happened for us. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. I'm so grateful for that today. I wouldn't trade the 17 plus years that we were together for anything. It's exactly where we were supposed to be, and we're exactly where we're supposed to be today. And we're going to be okay. I'm so grateful for that. Like I said, I think I'm coming up on time, but I'm going to close here. It was just a short excerpt. I don't have the book in front of me, but at the beginning of the meeting, I wanted to thank all the speakers. Every speaker has been great. Corey, if you're out there, it was so great to see you. It's been a long time. Great to see you last night. And Stephen, this is at least the second time we've spoken together, and I get so much out of your message. So thank you to everybody who put this on. Thank you to the speakers and the people who did the workshops. Like I said, I'm gonna read this little excerpt. It's from Al-Anon conference proof book called From Survival to Recovery. It's from a section that some people in Al-Anon call the Promises of Al-Anon. I know there's no such thing as the Promises of Al-Anon. I think there's a lot of stuff in our literature that says, if you do this, this will happen. To me, that's a promise. Our closing says, if you try to keep an open mind, you will find help. That's a promise. So to me, this excerpt is some of the many promises that Al-Anon has to offer. And like some other promises some of you may be familiar with, it starts with a big if. It says, if we willingly surrender ourselves to the spiritual discipline of these 12 steps, our lives will be transformed. And then it goes on to list many things that will happen to us if we're willing to do this. But my favorite one says, serenity will have meaning for us as we allow our lives and the lives of those we love to flow day by day with God's ease, balance, and grace. My life had zero ease, balance, or grace when I came into Al-Anon. And the fact that all of these promises and so many more have come true in my life, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, is truly a miracle for which I will be forever grateful. Thank you so much for letting me share.